Okay, gentlemen. Well, I think we'll make a start. I have the time at 2 minutes past 2 Eastern, so that's 2 minutes past 6. Let's just have a quick check-in. I'm Martin Francis. I wrote the software that we're going to be looking at today, originally inspired by Andy Robbins, who produced a spreadsheet, as you know, that he sent around North America. So I've been privileged to take that process on and automate it. I was the first administrator, but have not been for many, many years. So that's me. Who else do we have on the line today? Brandon, why don't you go next, sir?
Hello, gentlemen. My name is Brandon Jordan. I've been a NDB DXer since the late 70s, and I do have long inactive periods, but then I have periods of very high activity, and kind of motivated to keep this going. It's so helpful. So here I am volunteering, and
Thank you very much. And you're from Tennessee, is that right?
Yes, outside of Memphis, Tennessee.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Michael, why don't you say hello today? Michael, we're not hearing audio from you at the moment. Not sure if you're speaking. You're having USB issues. Okay, we'll skip Michael. We'll come back. Steve, do say hi.
Hi, Steve. Oh, hi, Martin. It's Steve out here on the West Coast, and beautiful day. First time on Zoom.
Yes, it feels like my first time as well, but we do our church services this way, so I should be better at this than I am. So you've been DXing a long time.
I originally started in 1986 when I got an ICOM R71, and been contributing ever since.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. Okay, so who else do we have now? We said hello to Anthony yet? Anthony, why don't you say hello? You're presently muted, sir. Thank you. Anthony, we're still not hearing it this time. Okay, I'm not quite sure why we're not hearing Anthony. Anthony, actually, if we're not hearing your audio, something you can try, if you look at the bottom of your screen, there's an icon that says mute. If you click on the drop up arrow next to that and change your speaker and then change back again, or change your microphone and then change back again to the one you expect to see, you might find that works for you. Sometimes I do that and it works for me. So try that drop up arrow next to the mute, and just change your setting and then change it back again. You might find it brings you back to life.
About that. Is that working?
That is working, Anthony. Good to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for the tip. That was the problem. I had the wrong microphone.
Isn't that interesting?
I'm Tony Casorso, and I've been DXing for, I don't know, 15 years maybe, and basically just wanted to listen in and see if this was something I might be able to do or not. Don't know. So,
excellent. Well, delighted to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed. Where are you based?
I'm in Denver.
Excellent. Okay, Michael, perhaps you can try that same trick if it worked for
Anthony. Yeah, I just tried this. Does it work now?
It's working perfectly. You're coming through
okay.
999. Okay, beautiful. So yes, obviously you're very well known to this community. You run that amazing handbook that so many of us have had over the years.
Yeah, that's, I don't know, DXing for me personally started around the mid-70s actually. And I guess from all the guys in here, I even met Steve in person up in Vancouver, BC, long time ago. Hi, Steve.
I got to unmute. Hi, Michael. Really nice to hear you again. That was a long time ago.
That was really, really long time ago. That's true. Yeah. Seems I'm the only one in this meeting, this local evening, at least European time, from Europe, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think that's correct. Perfect. Well, thank you very much indeed. Chuck, I think we haven't heard from you yet.
All right. Can you hear me?
We hear you fine, sir.
Okay, great. I'm Chuck Gumbert. I'm in Wichita, Kansas. I've been an SWLer since the late 60s.
Wow.
Got my ham license in the mid 80s. Was heavy into contesting and also ran quite a bit of Navy Mars phone patches back during the Gulf War. Went dormant in 96, came back in about 2013. Started with a small little PALSTAR receiver and just started getting into the NDBs about this time last year. So I'm a newbie.
Wow, brilliant. Well, it's delighted to have you with us.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so without further ado, I'll jump into the technical side of things, but I wanted you to know who we all were. And so thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate your interest in this. So I'm just going to explain some basic stuff. I'll start real slow and we'll kind of ramp it up. So the purpose of this RXX system, the reason why we call it RXX, by the way, is it's short for RNA, which was the original received in North America, REU received in Europe, and RWW received worldwide. So I just went RXX just to simplify that. And essentially, we now have two systems running in parallel. We've got the new version 2, which I hope you're all using, but I'm not going to assume that you are. And we have the original granddaddy, which is still alive and limping along nicely. So basically, the process of uploading logs is we're going to take two known quantities. We're going to take a signal, and we're going to take a listener, and we're going to join a signal to a listener by means of a log entry. So essentially, that's what we have. We really have just 3 entities in this system. There are 1 or 2 others to represent countries and types of signal and so on. But basically, we join a signal to a listener by means of a log record. That log record is going to join signal ID, listener ID, and then introduce a time and a date. Those are the 2 mandatories. Actually, even the time isn't mandatory, but it's highly recommended. And then, in addition, you can also have in that log entry additional details such as the frequency offset, the modulation offset, the tone effectively that you hear, lower sideband and upper sideband, and any other notes that you might have about the duration of the signal cycle time. And we can talk about that in some detail, and also the format as well. So, for example, Canadian signals tend to have dash after ID. So basically, it's going to go dee, 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 or maybe not, and then a long turn, dee, which will last for several seconds, and then that cycle will repeat. So that's what we call the cycle time. The reason why these are increasingly important is that people who use, by the way, before I get too involved in my own conversation here, yes, we are still recording. Please stop me and ask questions at any time. Also, if you struggle with my accent, because I am...
You know what, I've got my headset pointing in the sky. That's no use, is it? So somebody could have told me that. Can you all hear me clearly, and can you understand my crazy British accent?
It's very nice now.
Excellent. Sorry about that. That was an embarrassing way to start. And I only noticed that because I see myself in the screen here, and I realized that my thing was pointing at the sky. Okay. So what happens when we upload a logging? We're going to find a logbook list of entries, which we're going to find either through the email, or we're going to find it on the NDB or one of the other utility list groups. And then we're going to find out who the person who submitted it is. We're going to find them in the listeners list, and then we're going to submit to add a new log for them. I'm going to start sharing a screen, and I'm going to make it small enough that hopefully it can be seen in your windows, because I run rather a large screen here. So I'm going to make this a bit smaller, and then we're going to share this screen so you can see what we're looking at. I'm also just going to remind you that we're not using the live version of the database system for this. Consequently, it has a bunch of debug options in which will actually make it run a bit slower than the real system. So hopefully the real system will run a little bit quicker, and also the passwords and so on are different here. So let me start by sharing the screen. Hopefully I will share the right screen. Google Chrome, I think this is the one we want to share here. Gentlemen, do you see my screen?
Yep, that's fine.
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, we have, as you know, the classic system, and we have the new system. Up until not too long ago, the only way to upload logs was basically to use the classic system. And just for old time's sake, I will show you basically how that worked. Actually, I have to log in first. That's the same on both. And because this is a test system, I'm going to log in with a test password. So if you guys are interested in doing this for real, I will give you the real password and you can log in on the real system. But for the time being, I'm using this test password on this test site. So once I am logged in, you will see that I see a number of different options along this bottom row. I see admin help, info, manage, links to the NDB list website and so on, some stats and so on, the basics. But you will also see that when we go into the signals listing page, we'll see additional options that we didn't previously have. So we will see, for example, options to, sorry, I've just changed the screen size. Hopefully that hasn't messed people up. We have the option to delete a signal and to merge a signal. And when we go into a particular signal listing, let's take our DIW system signal, then we also have the option to make changes in here if we wanted to for whatever reason and save them. In addition, when I go into the logs tab, you'll have the option to delete an individual logging. It's a bit of a blunt instrument. It's getting more sophisticated on the new version. And we're going to have a peep at that in a second. You also, in addition, have one or two management tools which have been provided to deal with some of these synchronization issues. Let me talk you through that. So if a signal, let's say Dixon DIW, has been heard 1,000 times, we would expect to find 1,000 separate log records in there. So if the signal thinks it's been heard 1,000 times, I should have 1,000 pieces of paper in a filing cabinet somewhere indicating individual loggings of that signal. Occasionally, more particularly with the older system, that could get out of sync. I might have deleted a couple of log entries, for example, because this person didn't hear it in 2190, because that's clearly a typo. So I've removed the logging, and then for whatever reason, the original signal, which has a little count inside that record as well, saying how many times it's been heard. The reason we do that is for performance. It's quicker for me to list 100 signals and have each signal maintain a separate individual internal copy of its count than for me to list those 100 signals and then look up 10,000 records to figure out how many logs there are presently. And obviously we want this to act quickly for people. So because of that, we have this little manage section, which I've also replicated in a new one with one or two tools that we can use for fixing things if things get a little bit wobbly and out of sync. So we can, for example, update the statistics and heard in lists and so on for any individual signal. If I jump into a particular signal, I want to show you something here. I'll switch to the new system in a moment, but for the time being, in the case of Dixon DIW, which I tend to use as my guinea pig because it's right at the lower end of the band and it's easy to work with, we will see in this little heard in list here, all of the countries or radio countries like states in which this signal has been heard. And you'll also see that on the classic system, you'll also see some of those entries are highlighted in bold. Those bold ones indicate that a listener heard that signal and logged it at some point between 10 o'clock AM and 2 o'clock PM, their local standard time. So that gives you an idea of the extent of daytime reception. And furthermore, you can click on that and then you would get the original map that we had there. Now, this is a real clue as to why we needed to rebuild this system. You see what's happened here? Oh, maybe you don't see what's happened here. Do you see the pop-up window that just arrived or do you not? Could somebody? You don't. That's because I'm sharing one screen and not the whole window. I'm going to share the whole screen. Give me a second. Yes, that would have been a problem. So let me jump to hopefully desktop one and we should see this. Okay, you may see that a little bit smaller now. That might be too small for some people. Can you see this okay, depending on the screen resolution you're running with?
That's just fine for me.
Yeah, it looks fine.
Okay, does anybody have a problem with this screen resolution? I know that the writing is impossibly small on that map, and that's really a problem with the system. That's not a problem with your eyes. Okay, so had this great idea in the beginning that we would show a list of all the people that have received this beacon on the left-hand side, and then as you move your mouse over this list, you can see the points highlight so you know where they are. Problem is with the signal like DIW, everybody's heard it many, many times. So therefore, I had far too many to accommodate in that. This was probably the first thing in the system that made me say, I really have to rebuild this whole thing, because that clearly wasn't going to fit. Let's jump to the new system. So I'm going to switch over to new. I'm going to log in again, because even though it's the same login username and password as for the old system, so if you know that, you know how to get into the new one, it's not going to remember that I've logged in to both systems. Once I'm on the new system, then I can jump between RNA, REU, and RWW without it having to log me in again. And that's just the way this system works. And again, because this is a development system, it will take a little while just to log in. Don't worry about that. It's going to be much, much faster for you. Okay. Log on has moved location slightly. I can hear the fan really spinning in this computer right now. Maybe I should have used the live version. It just makes me look bad. Okay. Now, one of the other big wins that we have with this new system, as you probably know, is that it is what we call responsive. That means that the screen size and layout changes. So if I'm looking at this on a cell phone, it will look like this. If I turn my cell phone sideways, it might look like that. If I'm looking on a desktop, you see things move around on the screen, and you see that a lot more when we actually look in the signals list and the listeners list. I'm sure you're already familiar with that, so I don't want to waste too much of your time talking about that. Okay, so obviously I think I might jump to the live system actually. This is taking too long. I'll give it a couple of minutes more, and if it doesn't speed up a little bit, then I'll change to the live system, which I know will run quicker. So here we see in the listener screen that as I make the window smaller, things stack up to work with whatever type of device I'm using. In fact, if I go right down, then the whole signals list changes, and now we see one record per block like this. But functionally, it's identical in terms of what the system actually does. So this is what we call a responsive layout. This is one of the things I couldn't have done with the old system. And if we now have a look at that signal map, you see I've also taken the opportunity to highlight this a little bit clearer. So daytime logs are now highlighted with this little daytime thing going on. So it's a little bit clearer. And if I click on the North American reception map now, once that's loaded, then we'll see it's a scrolling list on the left-hand side. So we don't have any space problems that we had before. The other thing I tried to do on here as well was to try and limit the number of pop-up windows we have. So previously, if you looked at the reception map for Dixon DIW, it was a completely separate window. Here you'll see that it's grouped along with a collection of things like the weather, a map actually showing where the signal is, the loggings of the listeners, and the profile all on one page. And then you can scroll up and down, and we don't really have any of the space problems that we had before. And again, because this is a responsive website, things can shrink, and the map continues to work just the same as it did before. It doesn't lose its position. So it's a lot more friendly to that kind of responsive layout. I just think it looks nicer as well. Okay, so when we have our heard in list, the heard in list here is all of the either countries, if there's no state for that particular country. So in Dominican Republic, there's no states associated with that, so we just see DOM. And all the states and provinces, or the territories in the case of Australia, where that country, where that signal has been heard. Again, if you imagine that this signal had only been logged once from Dominican Republic, and then I delete that single logging, this is another example where that list would then need to be automatically updated so that Dom would disappear off that list, and clicking on this list would no longer bring that, that place up. Okay, so let's jump in now to the listeners, and we're going to start uploading some logs. So I think first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the NDB group, and I'm going to open that in another window so we can have some logs to play with. So let me go into messages, and oh, there we go. Dave Tomasco has uploaded a log. So I'm going to copy his loggings from this window. Well, we have some more here. Perhaps I didn't. No, it looks like it's just those. Of course, it was a very noisy weekend, I heard. So I'm going to copy that. Hopefully this is going to work okay for me. Then I'm going to go into listeners, and we're going to find Dave Tomasco, and we're going to upload logging for his primary location, assuming that this is his primary location. This is another thing you have to watch out for, because a lot of the time people will operate from multiple locations, or they'll go on holiday and they'll report loggings from there. So when you're uploading logs, make sure that they are from their usual location. Okay, so in this case here, let's make that screen a little bit bigger, because as you see, it's doing its responsive layout thing. So nice and big. I can either go down this list and find Dave, or if he's one of the most recent people who I've uploaded, and you tend to find that most loggings come from a few people. The last 25, I think it is, logs to be uploaded, people will appear in this list along the top. Again, this is one of those features that you will only see if you log in as an administrator. So if I log off, this whole middle section disappears. So let's find Dave Tomasco, assuming that it's his regular location. Let's just make sure that he is from his regular location and not on holiday somewhere. He hasn't said he's on holiday, so I'm assuming that this is his normal location. I'm going to find Dave in this list just to make sure. Yeah, things seem to line up. That looks like where he's logging from. So I can either add the log from here, if this is somebody new, and you'll see here's me pointing at the screen, that's no use to you at all. At the very, very bottom left of this screen, you should see the URL being highlighted. Classx.com, en, listeners, 340 upload. This is another thing I tried to do with a new version of the system, to simplify the URL so it's not full of question marks and squiggles and very incoherent places. So for example, everything to do with this listener is going to be prefixed with EN, that's the language, RNA, that's the system, listeners, that's the thing we're looking at, and then the ID of the listener, and then whatever other operation you might have. So if I move my mouse now off add log and I move it onto this delete icon, then I see the exact same URL but /delete. But we're going to be adding a log, nothing so dangerous as that. Primary locations, each listener will only have one primary location at max. So if they move house, as I did a couple of times, then the other ones then become secondary locations. And part of this is about simplifying log uploading for people. Obviously, if people are reporting from different locations, you may even need to add a new location. Are there any questions at this point? Judging by the stunned silence. Oh, somebody unmuted. Brandon, you have a question, sir?
No, I was just saying no.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's go for Dave. I can click on here. I could also, of course, with the new system, click in here, bring up his profile and actually add the log from here. This is another one of those where I've combined a bunch of different windows. In the old system, log upload was a totally separate, isolated little satellite window. And now log upload, if you're logged in as an administrator, is part and parcel of the listener's screen, which is loading. I promise you it is 100 times faster on the live system. So basically clicking on that link would take me to this tab automatically. So once this uploads, something else to be aware of is that different listeners use different pieces of software to record their loggings. And it varies over time. So people might be using a system one year and then they migrate, they find some other piece of software. A lot of people are using WWSU or this YAN thing, which is for DSC loggings, I think. Anyway, so consequently, there's no point having to figure out what format each listener is using every time you upload a log. The system will actually save their last used format for you. So if I paste this in, that almost worked. Let me just press line up here. What line up is going to do for us, you see if we look at this logging here, I can't really draw a vertical line, but you see that some of these IDs are 3 characters long, some are 2, some could potentially be 1. So if I press line up, something magical should happen. It will figure out the longest, and then it will space everything out so that they all line up in that order. Now you see we also have a bunch of blank lines as well. Now let me explain what's going on up here, because this may be new to you. What we do in this window here, this is where we specify the format that we expect this logging to have its information in. The loggings will always come in a tabular kind of format, such as this. Usually the full year, month, date, all in one field, but not always. Hours, minutes, and seconds. No, just hours and minutes, no seconds here. And then the frequency, and then the ID, which is like the call sign of the signal. And then anything else is interesting information, but not necessarily relevant to us actually getting the log in. Now, you remember how when we spoke before, I said that our job as an administrator is going to be to upload the loggings, and each logging essentially is a piece of glue linking a signal to a listener at a particular time and date, together with perhaps sidebands and so on that they may have picked up at the time. Assuming that these signals all exist in the system, we're next going to ask the log parser engine to go and look up all of these signals, make sure that these signals all look good and legitimate, and then we're going to look over the results, and if we like it, we're going to submit it, at which point all of these different signals is here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 10 about. Was it 11? Anyhow, however many it is, I think it's 10. Each of those signals may be updated. So the individual signal records in the database, if this signal here, this TN on 239, if this hasn't been heard, if the last time that this was heard, let's say, was May the 15th, and now we receive it on this log, if we enter this log, then as part of the log upload process, that signal will also be updated. So it'll say, yes, it actually was last heard now on the 27th, which was yesterday. And if it had never been heard in Tennessee before, it's now going to report, sorry, forgive me, this makes no sense. This guy's in Illinois. It's going to track that this signal has been heard in Illinois at that time and date. If Illinois was a new state for this, then that is now going to be added to the heard in list, and that will forever be associated with this signal. I'm about to press pass log now. You'll also notice that there are some blank lines. We're not concerned about that. The system, when it sees the blank lines, should just ignore those. So if I press pass log now, in fact, they should all collapse all the blank lines should disappear, which they have. And now it moves on to the next stage, which is going to be to look up in the database each of these different signals for these different frequencies. Now, there is a small capture window, shall we say. I think I've programmed it so that if you're within 1 kilohertz of the stated frequency and it can make an absolute match, it will actually put that in and assume you got it right. Could I just, I would like you to unmute your microphone if you have previously had a go with the old system. I think you have, Steve.
You mean uploading?
Yes.
No, I never have.
Oh, you never did. Has anybody who is on this call at the moment ever had an experience with uploading logs on the old system?
Yes, I did.
Okay, Michael, thank you. This log review window, as you will see, looks rather different. And we have options on here to uncheck everything. And we can actually selectively upload just certain logs if we wanted to. If I had question marks over this one, I don't believe you really heard that signal, then I can uncheck that signal or check it. I can also en masse check all of the good loggings. A good log is basically where the system says, everything about this log looks fine. It's been heard in the state or province or country that it was previously reported in. The date looks reasonable. The time looks reasonable. I found this call sign on this frequency. And the other thing it's going to check as well is if the person had submitted the offsets information, below sideband and cycle time, that if it was within tolerance as well of what the previously reported time was, that would then show up in that color. So what we have here is a good clean set of logs by Dave. And if I now submit, you're now going to be moved on to the next stage. In this case, this is a no-brainer. Again, just to review, we copied the logs from either an email that we received or from the NDB list message board. We pasted them into the window. We already had Dave Tomasco's previously used log pass format, and assuming he hasn't changed it, those tokens are all the same, then we can just go ahead and do that. I'm actually going to show you what I mean by these tokens now, because there's a lot of them. Over the years, there have been many different ways people have used, especially with their own homegrown software, to actually upload these loggings. And we've had many different formats. I mean, hundreds of different formats. Especially in the early days, it was kind of the Wild West out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the log format. Just X that, and I'm going to press save. At this point, the system is making, okay, it says I've got to put something in. So I'll just put that in. I'm going to press save. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about the formats. So at this point, I don't have enough information to be able to figure out what any of these logs are. I only have the year, month, and date. So if I try to pass this log, it's going to be a bit of a travesty. I'm actually deliberately going to put in an invalid token just so I can get at the help, which will come. I'm going to type in Martin, and then I'm going to press save at this point. It's going to throw an error now. It's going to tell me there's no such token as Martin, and then it's going to give me a link to the help so I can figure out what the formats are. Now again, for speed, I've put shortcuts for two well-known systems in here. So at this point, we should now see token not recognized as a problem, and you can click on help. Now in the new system, as opposed to the one that Michael will have used before, we can get all of the information comes up here, and this tells us basically what the valid fields are, and I can actually click on them to type them in. So if I decide now I'm going to look for, that's clearly hours and minutes, so it's not that one with the colon, it's this one. If I click on that, I should now be able to go back here and paste it. There he is. And I also need kilohertz. I've also added megahertz recently as well, because we're actually starting to see 23 centimeter beacons even being uploaded. And to convert that from, you know, gigahertz effectively into kilohertz is a lot of typings of zeros, and people are starting to make mistakes doing that. So I'm going to type in kilohertz. Again, you don't have to actually use this copy paste thing each time. You can just paste them in. I already know what this format is anyway. Now, I will also explain to you, I can click out of there and that should, click help again, that should take that away. Let me show you something else as well. The actual alignment of these things is quite important. If I press save now, and you'll see we have a little bit of a gap here because kilohertz has got 2 spaces and then we've got the ID. If I try and pass that log, which I'll do in a second, it's going to throw me all kinds of errors because in fact it's only going to start looking at the ID field on the second character. So this should probably be a train wreck when we do this. Again, I promise you it's 100 times faster on the live system without all the debug code. But anyway, let's try passing this. I know that this will look awful. I'm banking on it. Okay, so masses of errors. It's giving me the option here, hey, do you want to add this new signal? Because I don't know what this signal is. So it gives me the options to add them. And I can also use this icon here to go up and down, or I can go up to the previous error. Again, this is a feature we didn't have on the old system, up to the very top. So clearly I can see something's gone catastrophically wrong in here. The system is actually showing me as well which issues or which logs have issues, and in fact it reproduces that full list for me here. If I had issues with 3 or 4 signals, it would add them to this list, and then what I can do is I can copy that whole list. In fact, I can even click on an icon that says copy or a link, and now I can skip those logs, upload the 99 good ones, and then I can write back to the person who submitted the log and say, hey, just want to query these 3 logs here. Did you really hear Australia at 2 o'clock in the afternoon from London? No, maybe that was a typo. Maybe you went some other signal that's in France. So clearly that's wrong in terms of the format. I will finally upload Dave's signals in a second. Once again, my apologies for how long this is taking to load for you. Okay, so let's just line this up properly. Now, there are fields that people like to add to their logs that may not necessarily be relevant. So they might say, for example, first new at this location, you know, exclamation mark. If I don't have any need to have that information in the log, I can simply use an X field like that. So as the system reads this, these characters here are going to be treated as year, month, date. These hours, minutes, kilohertz, and so on. Everything after an X up until the next valid token is going to be ignored. So frankly, you can put anything you like in there. It's not going to affect the result. Let's put Dave out of his misery and submit this log and see if we can find perhaps some European logging, which might have offset information as well, which we're going to be interested in. Okay, so this is a no-brainer. We can upload this quite happily. There's no errors, there's no warnings shown here. There's nothing that's been skipped. There's no warning shown here, nothing coming up in red. So I can submit that log. At this point, let's have a look at something. You see how Dave's logs, his count is 27447. And that's how many signals he's heard. And presuming none of these are fresh signals, judging by the weekend that you had all the static. But I should expect to see that figure jump up by 10 in a second. So 27447, let's see if it does it. Submit log. Now the only time that wouldn't happen would be if these logs had already been submitted, perhaps earlier during the CLE, and then this is just the wrap-up log at the end. So this is step 2 that we're just moving on to step 3 now. So the next step is going to be to tell us what actually happened, assuming that I pressed that correctly. Yes, it says waiting. So it's processing the log now. Okay, now we should see the log pass the results. So we're going to see how many of them are new for this listener and how many repeats and how many are going to be exact duplicates. Well, none of them are exact duplicates, but it checked 10 logs, 10 of them are repeats, and 10 are the latest for that signal. And you now see that log count has jumped up 457. And in fact, if I now click on logs and then sort by log date, I should be able to see the fact that each of those logs that were uploaded were the latest for that signal. So in addition to updating Dave's signal list here as well, how many he's heard and how many loggings he's had, we should also see, when I sort by this in descending order, I'll tell you about ID in a second. That's a new feature that you don't have yet, but it's coming very soon. That's the ability to actually edit an existing logging. So we see here that 2:30 was heard on that date. And in fact, if I open this in a new tab, just to keep this nice and simple, actually, I didn't need to do it that way. I could have just clicked on it. That's fine. When this window opens up, we should see that the latest logging was the one that we just clicked on. Sorry, 1 second. So as I say, uploading a log will also, if it's the latest log for that signal, will update various statistics for it as well. If I was uploading a bunch of old logs that David sent along, so, oh, I just found these, for some reason I didn't send them during 4 CLEs ago. He submits it now. Because the system is also going to check the dates of these loggings as well, if it sees that this log is the latest for this signal, then that will also be used to update upper and lower sideband and cycle time as well. So we can clearly see that the last logged date is now the one that Dave Tomasco had provided, and that's now correct. Okay, let's have a look at another log. Any questions before I continue? That's all clear as mud? Okay, let's have a look at this one. Let's see if we've got some sidebands. We don't have sidebands on this one, but we've got some interesting European signals. You know what, I'll copy them anyway. So that is for, oh, gentleman we have on the line right now. At least we did. I was expecting, actually, you know, we don't have Cormac on the line. He was trying to join. Can I just check my email, see if he, because he did mention he wanted to join. Give me 1 second here. Boy, that is awfully tiny. Just see if he responded. Nope. I guess not. Okay. All right, so well, let's upload his information anyway, and then we will. I'm going to change systems now. We're going to go to Europe. Again, we're going to check, make sure that he's caught those. Well, he's mentioned his shack, so he is at his normal location in Cork. So we're going to change system to REU, which I've already clicked on that link, and it's going to change in a second. You see that the URL that we have in the web browser window here as well will be pretty clear, and it'll tell us where we're going. The first 2 letters will tell you what language the interface is running in. I do intend to fully support multiple languages. We'll probably add Italian to this as well, because we have a few people in Italy now. Okay, so hopefully, yes, we have Cormac there. If I click on that link directly, by the way, it will open me straight on his log upload window. That's another little time saver that we have. So instead of me clicking on the person's name and then clicking on loggings, if I click the add log for, then it will take me straight to that. I see that we had our latest logs were uploaded for Joachim today, in fact. Not necessarily NDB logs. Remember, we have different administrators who look after different signal modes. So if I paste this in now, hopefully that should line up. It doesn't quite line up. Now that is interesting. I'm hoping that this is the correct. Let me make absolutely sure I've got this right here. Yeah, this is interesting. He seems to have changed his log format. So I'd better change that over. So you see here, his log date format is dash month dash date. Now I know most of the people on the line here are American. They don't like this date format. I love it, because when I see this, I see everything automatically sorted by in date order if I were to sort that column. So I'm going to need to change that token, because that token is not correct for what we have here. Sorry about the autocomplete. Oh my goodness, autocomplete, stop it. So I'm going to change that to YYYY-MM-DD. And hours and minutes is not quite right either. I got to put a colon in there. At this point, I also see that we have kilohertz is full decimal at the end, which makes sense because of the type of CLA we've just done. So that's why. So I'm going to shift that over a little bit, and then I'm going to press save. So if he's changed format, then if I press save, then all of his future loggings will come in into this format. It doesn't matter that kilohertz has a decimal place in it, that makes sense. So all we've done at this point is we press save to save the format for this listener. I haven't actually passed anything at all yet. Now, I'm probably going to end fairly soon. I know a couple of people have to disappear off the line. And this is interesting. It didn't recognize my token because I typed in a hyphen. Did you see that? I should have remembered that. It's not a hyphen that we use, it's a dot. And a dot is essentially a wildcard for any character in this. So it didn't recognize YYYYMMDD with hyphens. So I got to change that format. And the reason why it didn't recognize that, and the clue for me, was that it also threw this in at the bottom. The following details were also required. It is acceptable to receive a log entry from somebody if all of the loggings are on the same date, all grouped in a heading, like on Christmas Day, I heard all of these, and then they list a bunch of things with times. It's a pain in the bum when they do that, but at that point, then you have the option to split it up and type in the year, month, and date in fields at the bottom. The system will recognize those and use those instead. But in this case, we have multiple date span. That's on the 6th, that's on the 20th, that's on the 6th. So all kinds of stuff, and we've got some 18 here as well. So that's clearly not going to work. So the format that I can use, any of these different formats, which should cover all of the different options that you might have. For example, if I see D, a single D, that means that if the person enters a single character for the date, so it's the, well, it's not going to work today because of the 28th, they're going to need 2 characters to do that. But let's say if it was the 6th, they could type in 6 and then put a dot or a space or a hyphen or whatever it is they're going to use. And then they might type in MAR for March. Well, what are you going to do with that? Well, at that point, you need the log format that has MMM, which is the 3-digit month indicator. And YY is if they type in, 20 instead of 2020. People are crazy. They've got all kinds of different log formats. This one's fairly sensible, or fairly by the book. And we will see it's year, month, date. Not that one, it'd be that one. So I know that that's an acceptable format. I have to click on help again to get rid of the help, which is a little bit of an oxymoron, but there we go. Now with the new that PSCOV NDB system that people are using now, and this is all alien to me, I have to be honest, I've actually not switched on a radio. I've not had a radio to switch on in about 4 or 5 years now, which is very sad. Hopefully someday when I reach retirement, I'll be able to do this again. So it's not prompting me now. We also need the date, so that's a good sign. If I click in pass log now, you'll also see that this one doesn't have offsets or cycle time. But the point I wanted to make was that this PSKOV NDB system, I'm not even sure how you guys say that. Why doesn't somebody who uses it tell me? Nope. Okay. Well, here's an interesting thing. We have 2 possibilities for TLF. This looks to me like somebody may have made a mistake. We have a second entry in here for TLF, Toulouse, and this is the reason why it's come up to give us a choice between these 2. I can see in the skipped logs at the bottom that the log was originally reported on 331.5. But I also see that for whatever reason, we have a bunch of entries in here, all these places, where it was heard on 332. This is one of those ones where you're going to have a look at the information and figure out which one of these it is. Clearly it's one and the same beacon, but the last time TLF was reported on 2170224, forgive me, the last time it was heard on an odd offset, odd carrier frequency, was about that was 3 years ago. So it seems unlikely that that's where it is now. Perhaps we should ask Michael. Michael, Toulouse, what's the correct frequency, sir? If anybody knows, you do.
Yeah, just unmuted. The point is actually that TLF used to be on 331.5 and was at that time using, if you look at the very right-hand side, at that time it was still using that old French format, which means it sent its idea followed by a very long tone.
Yes.
And then at one point in time, it changed over to that 400 hertz offset scheme. And also dropped the tone. And I don't know whether at the same time or not, they also adjusted the carrier frequency to now read 332 instead of the original 331.5.
Excellent.
So
delighted to have you on the call, sir, because if anybody knew, I'm sure it would have been you. Thank you very much. So here we have a choice. The system's going to try and make its best guess for us, but in this case, we actually have to make a judgment call. So unfortunately, this gentleman who reported it on that frequency, because that's obviously the database he's using, that is incorrect, and I can make a judgment call. This should have been that one. When I make that checkbox, this one will disappear. I also want to highlight to you the fact that, I'm not sure if it's coming across on your screen and you can see this clearly, but do you notice how everything is kind of grayed out and also in italics on here? Everything, all the text is leaning. That indicates that this signal is reported as no longer operational. If I click on here, it should bring up details for that signal. And we will see that the active flag for this signal should be off. So this is clearly a signal where we have a choice. And in fact, it's actually helped us here because the original listener reported this on the wrong frequency, but it was close enough that the capture system within here was able to figure out that that was a potential signal candidate. We can see here signal status is inactive for that signal, which is the reason why it's grayed out and so on. And we can see the date on which that was last heard as well. So clearly that's not the one, this is the one. I can now submit the log. I might have a word perhaps with the person who submitted this and say, update your database, mate, because that's actually not correct. And I know that one of the elements of the last CLE was actually to pick signals up that were on odd frequencies instead of standard decimal zero carrier frequencies. So perhaps that was what the person was getting at when they tried to submit. So although this doesn't look like it's from the CLE because it's not the right time. Or is it? No, maybe. Anyhow. Okay, at this point I've pressed submit, and in 1 second that should go in and we should get the statistics for this. But again, might be an opportunity to mention to this listener. In fact, oh look, a bunch of new ones. So that's exciting. So somebody got a bunch of new stuff here. And in fact, his signal list should have gone up accordingly. I wasn't watching it. That's the total number of logs he's had. Everything should line up. Everything should be correct now. Total number of signals received. And I can press done. If I press done, that should close the window. By the way, one of our editors asked for that button because it was present on the old system and not the new. When I press done, the window should disappear. I'm going to find a more interesting one now with some offsets, hopefully. Sweden. Pretty sure Anne does reports with offsets. Now, this is a conversation I wanted to have with you all about the use of offsets. I clicked on the wrong button, sorry. Normally I would use my email to do this, but I'm doing it from here so that we can see clearly what we're doing. Where have I clicked? Sorry chaps, bear with me. Okay, let's click on the actual link. I'm just going to close the door because it sounds like my boys are up to something out there. And then I want to talk to you about, it looks like we're not using, yes, we are using PSCov. Oh, did I read that somewhere? No, yes, PSCov 2.1. There are a couple of quirks with this piece of software that you have to be aware of. And I'm going to talk about this in 1 second. Bear with me a second, I've just got to close my door. Okay, as I understand it with this software, which seems absolutely brilliant, what it does is you would tune to a particular frequency. I think it's for software-defined radios, and then it looks for patterns. And you can basically set the window to be a certain width, much like an old fax machine in terms of how it scans its lines. And then when it sees a repeating pattern, all the lines suddenly line up, and now you've got yourself an ident. And this works, of course, because NDBs are automatically keyed. There's not a person sat in a shack somewhere trying to type out repeated Morse code. That would never work if they tried to do that. But because this is automated, then there's a repeating pattern. Consequently, if I go and send the same ident 3 times, and the gap between the start of one ident and the start of the next ident is always 10 seconds, but I go and record 3 windows worth, I might submit that and say that there's a cycle repetition time of 30 seconds and then go put that in the book. That's not actually correct. It's not 30 seconds. You might actually get much better, much clearer image if you actually zoom that in, and now you suddenly saw, actually, you know what, it comes really sharp when I do 10 seconds because the cycle time is 10 seconds. Do any of you use this software-defined radio and this PSCov NDB?
Yes, I'm using it.
Michael, what do you see? I see some very odd cycle times being logged, especially in REU at the moment, with some people taking a signal that's been reported with a cycle time of 10.2 seconds for years, and suddenly now it's 30.6. And I'm looking at it saying, that's not right. Somebody's messed with that. But the problem is, once that happens now, oh, everybody thinks that's the cycle time. So that's what they set their PSCOV window to be, and now that's what the signals they're seeing. So it seems to be just sort of this echo chamber of error. Michael, could you speak to that a little bit?
Well, what you actually see, and if somebody is not really well acquainted with NDBs and using the software just on his face value, so to say, then he might encounter signals, and they are being displayed there in one of those signal windows where you see like 2 or 3 patterns of the same signal, right?
Right.
So let's say 3 cycles of the same signal. And in the case of a 10-second ID length, usually, or cycle time, times 3 would create those 30 seconds you've been talking about just right now. And the author of that software, he has already devised some little buttons you can press to get this down to divided by 2, divided by 3, divided by 5, whatever.
Beautiful.
So that you are being displayed, that when you look on the display, you will see the signal only once, right? If you see it 3 times, you divide it by 3, then you see it only once, and then you will be displayed the correct cycle time. So there's a learning curve to that, in that people are not really sure what they see. They see that the software as such IDs a signal correctly for them, as far as the call sign goes and the frequency and so on, but not correctly as far as the cycle time goes, because it displays twice the cycle or 3 times the cycle and so on. So that is something which the person who uses that software needs to take care of, that the idea is displayed only once, and then it will be automatically the right cycle time. I hope I made myself roughly clear.
That's perfect. Thank you very much. There were a lot of unknowns, and you understand I'm not using the software, so I'm only looking at the signals. And I do keep an eye on the kind of stuff that I see go through. I'm a MDB list member, and I still look at these.
By the way, Martin, have you heard back from the author? Because you've been in touch with him quite a long time ago, but at least on the list, nothing is visible from him anymore.
No, I didn't hear back from him. Last time I spoke to him, just to explain this, the author had approached me, well, I don't know, a couple of years ago, asking permission to use the export feature on the REU or RWW to produce a database that he could then consume within the system, so that you've already got all of the NDB's last, best, greatest information in there.
Right.
And this is one thing is that the old system, the classic system as we call it now, had an Excel export feature which produced very non-conformant data, shall we say. There's nothing actually intrinsically wrong with the data, but the export that is most favored by systems these days is usually a comma-separated variable format. And what you'll have is you'll have a header row, and then you have rows and rows of data, where each field is separated by a comma. Of course, if the actual data itself, like a location, like Martin Francis, comma, such and such an address, such and such a state, such and such in the country, in that particular case, you'd actually have commas within it, so you'd have to wrap the whole thing in quotes. Anyhow, point being, it's a very efficient format for data transfer, but it's not the format I initially put on, because Excel back in those days when I first started with the system, it was a little bit hit and miss. So actually I had a different export format that was rather more complicated and involved HTML tables and so on. But it's not the preferred format, and it's not a format I wanted to retain on the new system. So I contacted the author of that software and said, could you please rewrite your importer system so that it uses the format, the standard CSV format that we have on the system, the new version of the system. I haven't heard back whether he's done it, or maybe I'll rattle his cage a little bit again, see if he does that. This echo chamber, what do I mean by that? If there's a piece of wrong information that goes into the system, I suppose NDB enthusiasts, all of us really, are like sheep, aren't we? We just follow the sheep ahead and then we wander off merrily up the mountain. And if somebody reports that the cycle time is now 30 seconds, well then, if we've downloaded the data and we put it back in again, now that echo perpetuates. And now from that moment, every time somebody presses submit, it's going to take the information that their Piskov log enabled software has, and it's going to put that value of 30 seconds back in. And we're saying, no, it's not 30, it's 10. So the purists who are concerned about the veracity of the data now get very upset about this, people like me. Thank you very much indeed for that. Well, that's something I wanted to bring to your mind. In this particular case, it looks like these offsets and these cycle times look convincing to me. So I'm going to assume that they're correct. So let's copy this up, and we're going to do this for Anders this time. Anders is one of our frequent people, and again, I would expect this to be from his usual location, and I'm hoping that that is his usual location. Let's click on this, make sure it is. I'm also going to demonstrate to you very briefly, and actually I realize as well, Brandon, you said you only had a couple of hours, so you only had 1 hour, so I think you're going to want to log off in a minute. Are you still okay for the next few minutes, Brandon?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much. And I apologize for the pace here. I'll try and pick it up a little bit, but I do want to show you a new feature that's coming as well. And then we'll actually talk about the mechanics of how you might go about taking this role on if you wanted to do it on a more permanent basis. So in this case, the log format that we saw there, even though some of the idents were shifted over with a couple of spaces and so on, that's okay. It's not going to cause a problem for us. We see that all these signals went in just fine. We see indicators that this signal has been heard before in Sweden. That's highlighted for you. We know that this listener is in Sweden. So therefore, as your sanity check, we're going to see a whole bunch of things. Some of this is remarkably, actually it looks like this is an identical log. So we're going to see in a moment that these are duplicates. So I can see that because the offsets and the cycle times are exactly the same as the ones we've had. So this will be an example where we've now taken the logging and we're going to upload it a second time. Somebody's already gotten there and done this for me. Let's see if I'm right on this or if I'm just full of wind. Let's find out. It looks a lot like these logs were already submitted. We see, oh, on the second line here, you see this is the last time that signal was reported by this or by anybody. And then the line above is the current time. There we go. Smoking gun, exact duplicates. So they were already uploaded. Somebody's taking care of that for us. Now, if I go to logs, let's say I've made a mistake. That 30-second cycle time I was so upset about. I want to go in and fix that. There's a new system coming to help that. On a log screen such as this is listener logs. So now I'm looking at the loggings for this listener from the perspective of this listener. Is that clear? This is Anders. I'm pointing to the screen again. Why am I doing that? It's not helping you at all. Here are Anders' logs. And these are the dates that they were all submitted. Each of them has an internal ID. This is not shown anywhere on the system, but is the actual record of the log entry itself. So this is a new thing I'm bringing in now because I suddenly realized, let's say Anders' log, that was actually done from a remote location, not his normal location. So I can click on this as an administrator. Previously, I'd have had to delete it and then re-upload them. I thought, well, that's a pain in the bum to ask somebody to do that. So this is why I wanted to bring the ability to edit logs for the first time. This is an individual log entry. This is not going to be the whole book of logs. That's coming as well. I've got a plan in place for that. It's just not there yet. So once the screen finishes loading, again, it's a lot faster on the live system, or will be. It's going to show me all the possibilities for listener, all the possibilities for signal, and it's going to show me the currently selected options. So here I see that's where we have, that's Anders. He only has one location, but let's say he didn't really mean CT, he meant this one instead. CML, let's say, in Ireland. At this point, I could then press save and close, and it would subtract a logging for that signal, and it would add a logging to that signal. And it would also do two other very clever things for us. Let's suppose that the signal that we originally submitted, this was normally a 1020 hertz offset, but I've just gone and reported it as 400 and 402. So clearly I've gone and upset the apple cart. Michael, I'm sorry for all these English idioms I'm using on you. You're doing very well to keep up. But I've messed up the data now for CT because these offsets were supposed to be associated with CML and I've input the wrong one for whatever reason. When I change this and press save and close, what it will do is it will remove the logging with 400 hertz offsets for this station, and it will add them to this station. And it should also do two other things. It should automatically go through all of the logs for CT on 387 that remain at the end of this operation, and it will look for the very latest one with an LSB offset and the very latest one with a USB offset, and update that signal to put those values back. So if you've made a mistake, this should be self-healing. And in addition, it will also, now that we've just added effectively a new log to CML 387, it should now update that signal. See, is this log that we've just edited the very latest? If it's not, forget about it. But if it is, we might want to use these offsets and update the signal from it. In which case, you know, maybe it was 397 USB before, now it's 402. Maybe we switched to a backup transmitter, who knows? So this is part of the log maintenance thing that we have in place. Now, you can also get to this edit log from the signal perspective. So if I now click on the ID for this signal, because I'm logged in as an administrator, when I go to logs, not listeners, but logs for this signal, I should have the exact same record shown in that screen. I will call a halt to proceedings in a minute because I can hear the eyes glazing over. Okay, so once I click on logs, you see that we have this log 1902.402. Again, that's a meaningless word. It simply means the 1.9 millionth logging to be added to this system. Been a lot of logs in there over the years. This is why it's important to keep this information fresh and current and not stagnant. So I should see this exact same log here, but from the signal perspective this time. So now I'm looking for all of the logins for this signal, and now I see all of the names of the people and their receptions. And now when I'm looking from the perspective of the listener, I'll see all the signals that he's picked up. But you see, it's actually the same information. It might be in slightly different order, but it's the same thing. Is it the same thing? Should be the same thing. That's actually interesting. That's actually very interesting. I'm not seeing USB and LSB on here. I've got a bug on that system. I need to fix this. I'll fix it later. Clearly there's a bug there. But if I click on here, it's going to be the same log edit screen as I got from this one. So that's coming at some point. Now, in terms of final words here, I was very happy that Steve O'Kelly and Pat both sent me a paragraph or two which I was able to provide to the list, indicating the amount of time each week that they had to spend on uploading logs and so on. It seems prevailing wisdom is it's around about 1 hour. I'm trying to put things into this system to make this log processing quicker and more accurate. The new interface, I believe, is a lot easier and quicker to use than the old one, and makes it much easier to spot errors and to jump and do partial logs and all this kind of stuff. So I am working very hard to try and make it more effective and more efficient. But this is a very important resource. I really want to emphasize that. So I have been approached over the years by people who've said they'd just like to be able to look after their own logs and upload their own loggings. And I usually say no to that, unless I really trust them, because what I don't want the system to end up is one person making up a bunch of ludicrous logs that are just not true, not subject to peer review, and changing all the data. So I'm not really anxious to give somebody the keys to do that, but if somebody wants to serve the rest of the community and upload loggings for a particular data mode, or a particular region of the world. Maybe they just want to do Europe. Maybe they just want to do Australia. Then that's absolutely fine. I'd be very happy to take those voluntary suggestions. There's also another side of this as well, which is the awards. This is another part of the system which I had moved around in terms of the way that it's laid out, and it's now grouped underneath each listener. So each listener may qualify for certain awards. So if I click on this, I will see, in a similar way to the way I used to see with the old system, we'll see automatically generated for us a list of the best receptions for each award that this particular person qualifies. So again, this is based on the old system, but I think rather better. So a person who wants to apply for these awards, they can click on this and press order. That will then go to our awards administrator, who will then receive this email, which will include a specially formed URL that will indicate the exact awards that the person has. In fact, let me copy this. You see in this awards page here, I see all the different types of awards that are available, but the person here has actually indicated they'd like to order 3 different types. So the URL that's been produced should reflect that. So if I now go in and open up another window, paste that in, then I should see just those particular award types. The rest of them will be filtered out just to try and cut down on the noise. So one of the features I want to bring in is to have it so that all of the awards that have been issued for that person will actually be available on the website on their actual profile. So they'll see a little mini thumbnail picture of each of the PDFs for the NDB list awards. I just haven't gotten around to doing that yet, but it's coming. So at this point now I can see quite clearly, if I'm reviewing these awards, which ones have been selected. I think that's more or less the demonstration over at this point. Just to stress, this is an important resource. It's fairly straightforward in a logical sense. What we're doing here, we're providing the glue that logs the links signals and listeners. I think those are the main areas I really need to cover. If you need to add a new signal, the system will basically talk you through how to do that. If you need to add a new listener, we can do that with this button here, at which point there'll be certain pieces of information that we're required to put in. That's about it really from me. Any questions at this point? I see several people unmuted, so does anybody want to say anything?
Yeah, this is Brandon. I do have a question about the award.
Yes, sir.
Stuff is, are those still manually generated after somebody applies for one? Somebody creating the PDF, or I can't recall since last one I received one.
Yeah. They are at the moment, yes. That is something which I will try and automate at some point. In fact, it's interesting actually. The vast majority of awards reward requests at the moment come from 2 people in Italy, neither of whom are on this call at the moment, and they're keeping our awards admin very busy most of the time. But
so is Joe still handling those?
yes, he is, and in fact, he's provided me with a Dropbox, and he actually places a copy of the PDF in the Dropbox each time. So at some point, I'm supposed to work with him and maybe try and semi-automate that process as well. But I think at the end of the day, it would still need to have somebody at least approve that that was valid. So if I said that I picked up something from Antarctica and I submitted a log and somehow that had managed to go through, I would still want a grown-up really to vet that and make sure it's true. In all the years I've been involved with the list, which is 15 years and more, I have only ever encountered one occasion where we believe we actually had deliberate fraudulent reporting of logs. And when you consider that we presently have over 1,000 people on the NDB list, plus people on the other utility lists as well, I think that speaks to the integrity of this group as a whole and this whole hobby, that we are data fanatics. The truth, as I've said many times in my postings, is very important to us. If something's not right, we get upset by that. We want to fix it. So what I've tried to provide with this software is as many tools as I can to produce that. Brandon, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, please.
But no, that's cool. Yeah, I do a lot of DSC,
Mm-hmm.
DXing.
Yep.
Actually, 24
Are
hours
you,
a
are
day.
you on that list, presumably?
Yeah, so I would be interested in also volunteering for that also. I'm sure y'all don't, I'm sure there's not that many of those logs that come through.
Well,
But,
presently Peter Conway is dealing with those ones, but I'm sure he would.
okay.
See, here's the thing you got to bear in mind. I mean, we have flexibility. It's like a cabinet shuffle here. If we can get a few people who are interested in taking on certain things, perhaps Peter would just as easily take on, I don't know, maybe ham signals. Maybe if Steve's no longer handling ham beacons, and he had one of the best reasons I've ever heard for quitting, by the way. It was his wife's birthday on a certain date, and he wanted to quit. And I say God bless him for that he would honor his wife in that way and even give up this ridiculous hobby, at least that portion of this ridiculous hobby for his wife. I bless him for that. So yes, if you want to throw your hat in the ring, don't feel that you're pushing someone else out of a job. You might be allowing somebody else either the flexibility to take a long-earned break, or perhaps to move somewhere else. One of the people who had contacted me, in fact, who was presently, well, I might as well tell you, I think Roloff had suggested that looking after DGPS and Navtex was a complex and very full-time job. He said they produced so many logs for that. He says he would consider perhaps switching to REU editor if somebody else would pick that up and dropping Navtex. So that was an option as well. Yes,
Another
go ahead.
question I have, say if two of us decided we wanted to volunteer for RNA.
Okay.
That seems like that would be kind of complicated. Who's actually uploading which log, how to.
Mm-hmm. Well, for many, many years, Vignod and Roloff, no, Pat, forgive me, Vignod and Pat, what am I talking about? I'm so sorry, this is so embarrassing. Pat Vignod and Vincent Leclerc looked after REU together, and they had it down to a fine art. It was like a tag team with wrestling or something, and I think maybe it was something like they'd do a week each,
Right.
or they'd talk about stuff. So there was a clear cutoff. And again, this is down to dates on which logs were received. Of course, people might submit their logs a month or 2 months later. So you can't say, I'm going to cut this log up into little pieces and all the Tuesdays I get and all the Wednesdays you get. You've got to figure out what's going to work for you. But certainly a burden shared is a burden halved, provided that we can synchronize together. And the people on this list are so good at doing that, to share that workload. I've always been impressed by how well they work together and how diligent they are and how dedicated about the data. But thank you very much. A good question.
And how much time did Stephen O'Kelly say that was required?
He said it was a few minutes at low season. I guess during the summer when it's all static and everything else. And he said, and it could be as long as an hour in the middle of like a Christmas CLE or something like that when everybody's sending stuff.
An hour per day?
No, per week.
Oh.
Heavens, no. The system's not that bad. I'm not asking anyone to sell the soul for that. But I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, an hour each week is a chunk. You gotta want that. But I have to say, during the probably year and a half I was looking after RNA, and actually I was doing the worldwide stuff as well. Although the list was much smaller then, we had a lot less signals, a lot less signal modes that we dealt with, and a lot less listeners. I found it very rewarding, and it certainly helped me understand what was going on, in the bands and so on. It was a very useful filter for me to be able to see that. And I think a resource like this needs that steady hand, somebody that can look over stuff, see what makes sense, make those connections, ask the questions. This offset looks really weird. Now, if I've worked with a whole bunch of Cuban beacons and I know Cuban beacons drift like crazy, then I'm going to say, okay, that's Cuba. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so we're almost 2 million loggings in this system. You're taking on a tremendous legacy, a treasure trove of information. And whether you choose to get involved as an administrator or not, I'm not anxious to twist anybody's arms on it, but I'm delighted that you spent some time with me and looked at some of the intricacies of this system. I've enjoyed maintaining it. I enjoy working with systems that produce more usable information from existing raw data. I get a kick out of that. And it's kind of fun to see different pieces of software building interfaces, and PSCOV is not the only one to have done this. I think there's a DS, there's a couple of other radio logging softwares that have deliberately built radio interface or database interfaces to at least download information from the system. So it's kind of neat to see the information getting use in the public domain in that way. But again, thank you for your question there, Brandon. Any other questions?
Has there been any thought put to making an administrator's manual or something that a person could go step by step with at the start?
It's a terrific question. There is, in fact, an admin help page, but it's a little out of date. But if you click on it, it talks about the way that tokens work and so on. And since the administration process has changed quite a lot from the old compared to the old system, I have not updated it. Oh, that's awkward. Variable tabs does not exist. So I guess that's not working right now. All right. And again, you wouldn't see that on the live system. You would just see an error has happened. You wouldn't see all this information. Okay, so the information is out of date. And part of that is because I'm making changes. I wanted to spend my time actually working on the interface. I did know that the administrators who have now quit, in fact, or about to, were having a hard time keeping up with all the workload. So I wanted to try and expedite the actual functional side of this for them as quickly as possible to make their remaining time with us as efficient and hopefully pain-free as possible. But your idea of an admin manual, yes, absolutely. It's certainly a priority. It's certainly something I would want to see done. But then we haven't had a big turnover of admins. You got to understand. I mean, in the case of Pat has been in that job pretty much without a break for 15 years. I don't think he probably thought he was going to sign up for 15 years. He's technically still doing it right now, I think. But Steve, I got to admire him. He took it for a period of time and then he dropped, and then he took it again for another 5 years. So he's been very, very consistent as well. So in terms of training up new people, this is the first time I've done, obviously, using Zoom and trying to video record the proceedings. I do need to update the help documentation that you can't even see right now because I've got this silly little error here. Yeah, I need to update that again. Good question. Okay. Thank you, Steve.
So Martin, what do you, if we want to volunteer, what do you want to just say, hey, I'm volunteering, or looks good, I think I'm good with this?
Well, I think what I would like to do, now at the moment you have to understand as well, there's a lot of things I want to fix and improve in the system. One of them is this. At the moment, we have a single admin username and password that everybody uses. Now, for somebody that works in web programming for a living, this is an appalling security oversight. And it's like if you have a combination lock for the company that you work at, and then somebody leaves, they've still got the combination unless you change it and send everybody a new combination, which is a real pain. Because what the professionals would do is they'd say each person that works in this company is going to have their own key fob to RFID or something, or they're all going to tap their own particular number in. So when somebody leaves, I can disable that access code. Now, in terms of accountability, I've not had up to this point any actual record in the system as to who has actually uploaded that last week's worth of loggings. That hasn't been a problem up to now. Hopefully it won't become a problem, but if we had somebody who was making a real mess of it, it might be very helpful to be able to identify this person's consistently uploading these logs and they're coming out broken. I mean, ideally the system should be capable of seeing if something looks wrong and preventing them from doing it, but there's only so much one can do. So one thing I do want to introduce, Brandon, very soon is going to be a specific username and password per person. And then that way, if you wanted to have a go, Brandon, and say, I'll take it for a week and see if my wife divorces me, then I could issue you with a temporary username and password. You go in and you make those changes, and the logs that you have worked with will somehow be tagged that we can see that this package was uploaded with you. So effectively, you know how I told you before, we have a signal, we have a user or a listener, and we have this piece of glue called the log record. Well, the idea is that we would have an additional wrapper around that log record so that when I uploaded a bunch of loggings, as I did for a couple of our listeners before, that when they go into the system, they will be packaged and it will say, Brandon uploaded this log at this time and date. Now we've got some traceability and this whole package went in. Well, if Brandon now realizes, you know what, I made a mistake. All of those logs for Martin should have actually been from when he was on holiday in Quebec. I want to change the whole lot. Now, instead of having to go through one at a time in this painful system, Martin, what are you driving us crazy here? We've now got a whole wrap around the whole thing. And I can, at that point, I can say, all of these logs are actually from this location. They're not in Ontario. They're all in Quebec. Reprocess at that point, it should take care of everything. So that's one of the refinements I would like to be able to add to this system at some point. Of course, all of this is moot if nobody's actually administering. It's like, what am I doing this for? So that will be coming. So for the time being, Brandon, short answer to your long question, short answer to your short question, because I know you have to go and I'm trying to respect for your time. Let me send you the present username and password, or I'll add to the system before the end of day today an alternate secondary username password, which you can use to get trained with, and then you can take a go at it. As far as I can see, no records for RNA have been uploaded since I think they said the 17th. I just want to make one more point on that. Something else to be aware of is this. Just one second. If we have a look at the statistics, I usually have a hard time saying the word statistics, but I'm managing today. You will see latest log dates and earliest log dates and so on for each of the different systems. You'll see that will actually change. Given that logs associated with REU are loggings made for any listener who is in Europe, okay, according to the country database and everything else. So if we've uploaded a DSC signal for a listener in Europe, it might appear that the last log is 2020-06-28, but that might only be the navtex logs or DGPS logs. It might not actually be NDB, so that's not telling you the whole picture. This is the reason why we need to figure out what's going on with some of these things. So, Brandon, I'm so sorry for my waffle. I'm going to set up an alternative username and password, which I will get to you post haste. And then I invite you to, I guess, play the higher lower game, going through the NDB list for received in North America. Hopefully people are using the correct heading so that the right editor knows where to pick the log up from. And then you can have a go and you can upload some logs. I'll take some backups of the system database before you do. And when you're ready, you can give me a call and I will literally zoom you through it so that we can make that work. Is that answer your question, Brandon?
Yeah, I believe so. When did you say the last RNA logs were uploaded?
I believe they were about a week ago.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of a backlog, but it shouldn't be too bad.
Right. Okay.
It should be enough to get you started on. It's actually very therapeutic. I find it, when I was doing this, it's far more therapeutic than doing a crossword or, as my wife does, endless Sudoku puzzles. I really don't see the point of those at all, because at the end of it, all you've got is you've managed to fill in all the numbers. So it's what eternal, from an eternal perspective, what difference will that make to the world? I really can't imagine. Sorry. So latest log. Now it does say here the latest log was on the 27th. But again, bear in mind that might not be for NDB. If I click on last logged column, then I may find out, in fact, that was a DSC signal. So I'm sorting by last logged.
Okay. Yeah.
And that will tell me when that is. So it might be that somebody's brought it up to date, but it might be that they haven't. We'll find out in a second. If I turn on
Martin,
different, yes, sir.
Martin, this is Tony. I have to bug out. My wife is getting ready to leave, and I'm supposed to go with her. So
Perfect. You'll have a wonderful, wonderful time with her.
all right. Thank you very much for putting this together, and I really appreciate everything that you've done. And I hope at some point I will be able to contribute.
Perfect. Well, I'm very much grateful to you for your time. Thank you very much, Anthony. Have a great time.
Bye.
Bye-bye. So in this case, no, it looks like we are, wow. Okay. Now this is a bit tricky. What we're seeing on here now, I sorted by last logged, but I'm seeing some French, English, and Welsh signals on RNA, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Because they've been heard in Nova Scotia. Now, because they've been heard in Nova Scotia, that doesn't mean that the last log was from Nova Scotia. That means probably that this signal, which has been heard in North America, so therefore it's eligible to appear in RNA, was probably last updated from Europe. So what we're going to have to find is something which has only been heard here. And in fact, actually, this is interesting because this signal here in Tennessee has clearly never been heard in Europe. And it appears to be recent. So looks like we have had some recent updates made on this.
So would you suggest some kind of post or something saying, hey, I'm starting uploading logs from, a certain period. If any of your logs have been missed or, not been uploaded, contact me.
Absolutely. And why don't you just take a trial? You can be a guest admin for, I don't know, set a date. Set yourself an end date, because that's what poor Roloff didn't do, and that's what poor Pat didn't do, and that's what poor Steve didn't do. So why not say, and again, work this out with your wife, I will upload logs until 1st of August, or, and until the moment of that, and then we'll review, we'll see how it's going. Maybe some commitment like that. Again, I don't want you to feel that you're on the hook.
I'm already, I've been the editor of the IRCA DX Worldwide column for many years now, and I can't see this adding too much,
okay,
being too big of a problem. And plus, I'm really, I've been getting all of my antennas and stuff put back up, and my shack all cleaned up, and
lovely.
Getting back into NDB DXing, and this would be something pretty cool to actually help out instead of just submitting logs.
Well, that's terrific. I do love a volunteer, and so and yes, you absolutely go for it. Thank you. Now we have others, of course, from North America. Steve, how do you feel about what you've heard so far? Is this something you're interested in, just learning how the mechanics works, or?
Yes, this was very educational. I see a great potential for me to mess up the database.
We've all done it.
Yeah, but I'm not going to there's a possibility I might like to help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
well, maybe we can have Brandon's going on holiday. He's going to take that trip to Hawaii with his wife that they've been talking
like we
about.
talked earlier, maybe I'm more than happy to share the load with anybody that wants to. Maybe we could take a week at a time. More than happy, anything like that.
Well, the other thing, of course, is now that we have moved all the DGPS to a separate list and the DSC and the rest of it, there are different data modes that people may take a particular interest to. So this is another option. Chuck, what do you think?
I came here primarily just to learn how the whole system works, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
I hope you found it interesting.
Oh, I did. I've gained a much better understanding of what you guys go through to enter what we submit. So I really appreciate you taking the time for it.
You're very welcome, sir.
Now on the technical side, I'm hardcore old school.
Hmm.
I mean, I've got several boat anchors sitting here.
Lovely.
I'm not a computer guru or technically astute at all. I mean, just put in perspective, when I first got a computers, I typed my own cards and put them in the card reader.
Well, you managed to figure out Zoom, so you obviously typed the card right for that one.
I had to use it for my business, so I was, somewhat familiar with it.
Fair
But I'm the guy, when I can't figure out how to use the some of the apps on my phone, I give it to my granddaughter. She goes, "No, you just do this."
There you go.
I'm not the guy to help you with this.
Not a problem. Michael, how about you from a European perspective? Do you see this as something that you may be interested in working with? Again, feel under no obligation. You are doing more than enough for our community already with your excellent books.
I mean, this is part of my interest that is related to the books, because I always found that your database and that system is a very good material, so which I can use to increase the quality of my handbooks. And,
of course, everybody wins.
I will always look up signals in REU, RNA, RWW.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a great resource. In the last couple of months, let's say for half a year or so, actually what I did, I was going through old IQ recordings of mine.
Oh, yes.
Dating back to 2008, 2009, and so on, and re-examining them or analyzing them using that Psychov software,
Mm-hmm.
And I discovered lots of new signals which I never thought I would have heard.
Probably signals that are now silent even.
Yeah, that are become silent in the meantime. Yeah, right.
Isn't that interesting?
And I did upload those old signals into the REU.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because long time ago you provided me with it.
I did, yes.
So I roughly know, or I do pretty much know how it works, but not all the internals, which you and then you started working on that new version. That is something which I'm eager to learn and to understand what the differences are.
Mm-hmm.
But what I don't feel I would be to find the time to do is to stand in for what Pat has been doing all the time.
Totally understand.
Because
and again, feel under no obligation, please.
Because I'm busy enough with my handbook stuff,
Absolutely, yeah.
So, but one thing I wanted to know. So there are no new takers from Europe yet. If Pat steps down.
No, not yet. At least not formally. I did have sort of a couple of sniffs, but nobody's prepared as perhaps Brandon to jump in and say yes, let's go for it.
Mm-hmm.
But Roloff, I think, for example, if I'm remembering this right, and forgive me if I'm not, I'm sorry, I'm getting on. I think it was Roloff who said that he might hand over his data mode stuff and take it on instead, because he felt the data mode stuff was taking quite a lot of time.
Yeah, okay. It would be in good hands if Roloff could take over from Pat. Obviously.
Well, absolutely. Again, he's another real celebrity in this group. I mean, everybody's used his whip.
Yeah.
Including me.
Well,
listen, gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate your time. That did go on a bit, but I bless you, and I'm really grateful to you for your interest. Please reach out to me again, and if you're interested in taking this further, and I will happily furnish you with a username and password, and we'll get you in and give it a try. But feel under no obligation. And Michael, if you want to continue to poke about with the same username password you have for the existing system, you'll find it works just as well in the new system as well. Okay. It might be helpful.
I do have a quick question before Michael gets off.
Please.
I've been searching for the PS-COV 2.1.
Mm-hmm.
I've found all kinds of older versions. Is there a website? I mean, looks very interesting to me. I would definitely like to play with that. Is there a website that hosts that, or?
Not to my knowledge. But let me go back through or search through the mails, because I'm not 100% sure, but it might be that Roloff put up the software on his web space somewhere. I don't know whether it's actually the 2.1 version, or maybe I'm mixing things up and it's only the passports that he uploaded and not the software. I will go through the mails and get in touch with you directly, either telling you I found something or telling you, sorry, I didn't find anything.
That's great. Does everybody have their emails? So I guess you can get it through the list, can't you?
Yeah.
Are we all on the admins list, by the way? I know a couple of us at least are.
Well, I am.
I am not.
I'm surprised you're not, Steve, because you're such an old timer. I'm surprised that Alan wouldn't have press ganged you into that, but maybe you avoided it.
Or you mean on the list?
I mean,
Yeah,
yes, as an admin
yes.
for the list, yes. That's
Yes,
what you would.
yes, I am. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
okay,
I'm not.
gentlemen, you're not. Okay. I'm going to call a halt to proceedings. Thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate your time. And if you have suggestions, improvements, things that you'd like to see changed, then do let me know. And again, if you want that username password, reach out to me directly. Brandon, I know you're up for it. Don't want to
Yep,
put
I'm
anyone
going to
any...
send you an email this evening when I'm through some family, a family get together. And
Wonderful. You enjoy your family get together. God bless you.
God bless.
Thanks, gents. Bye-bye.